But of course, there's always a danger that you pay lip service to something and then in your actions you pay less attention to these principles. So the question that we discuss and raise in this general activity report is, what does this mean more precisely when it comes to political action? For example, when we deal with challenges like global poverty, return of regional wars, which we have in Europe, as you know, displacement and migrations of millions, globalization, as well as demographic changes, climate change, new health threats, public health, limited or no access to education, and several new developments in science and new technologies. So the test of the words are the actions, and what is the impact of this? And that is what we discuss in the second part of the general activity report, where we discuss the relations between EGE opinions and EU policies. And after a historical background, the key points in the remit are stated as follows. And the role of the EGE, as you know, is to provide the Commission with high quality and independent advice on ethical aspects of science and new technologies, and to help prepare and implement EU legislation and policies. And the next point is more important, and that is that it has to be independent because of credibility, and it has to be pluralist, it has to be multidisciplinary, and that means that every member of the group is not representing his country or something else, any organization that he or she happen to belong to. You are there in your own capacity. You don't have to go home and ask for permission. Can I say this? Can I say that? And in that respect, it's very different from CDBI of the Council of Europe, where you represent your country when you are there. So that's an important difference. And the EGE provides its advice either at the request of the Commission or on its own initiative. Now, what did we do during the last mandate? Between 2005 and 2010, we published 5 reports on very diverse subjects, ranging from nanomedicine to novel methods in agriculture and synthetic biology. We organized 4 roundtable proceedings, 7 issues of our newsletter, Ethically Speaking. By the way, all this is downloadable free of charge from the net. So you go to Google, you type EGE, and then comes the website, and then you click publications, you have them all, you can download whatever you want. We also made some changes to promote transparency and inclusiveness, in particular concerning the selection rules and rules of procedure. We organized, as I said, a number of open roundtables for interested stakeholders and NGOs and web consultations, as well as the widely used EGE website with more than 168,000 visitors last year. Now, the typical structure of a report, not very surprising, is that it begins with certain starting points which set, so to say, the scene of the policy-making background. EU treatises, EU directives, relevant international conventions and declarations. Then, depending on the subject, the state of art is described. In science and technology, when we wrote about nanomedicine, for example, there was new developments in nanotechnologies, new developments in nanomedicine. Near future trends, overview of hard and soft law regulations, things like that, providing the background. And then problems and concerns raised by the state of the art in science or legislation. Sometimes different legislations overlap, and sometimes there is a gap between legislations. That could also be a concern. And the ethics framework relevant for dealing with these problems and concerns are indicated, and on that basis, recommendations specifying ideally who should do what and why are issued. We could suggest that the Commission should do something, that member states should do something, that EU agencies or institutions should do something, or others. So ideally, that was what we wanted. Now, a novelty in this general activity report is that we made an overview of the recommendations in a table, which paved the way, very interesting, at least for ourselves, about the sort of recommendations that we had issued. And concerning, for example, safety, biosecurity, dual uses, protection of environment and biodiversity, information, alternative energy supply. If you discuss surveillance technologies, then of course different issues come up than if you discuss nanomedicine or synthetic biology. So that's why it was interesting to compare the recommendations under certain general headings made in different contexts. So we also made recommendations in the last reports concerning food security and food safety, sustainable agriculture, consumer rights, governance, intellectual property rights, and research support. Again, depending on the topic, different ideas about what research should be supported and how were of course articulated. Now, a concrete example taken from the foreword written by President Barroso to the General Activity Report. Concrete examples, he wrote, include the societal and ethical implications of nanotechnology as key elements for EU research, the revision of the Common Agriculture Policy, the ethical review of EU-funded human embryonic stem cells research projects, the interinstitutional debate on novel food regulation addressing animal cloning for food supply, and the ethical and safety issues of synthetic biology. In all these areas, the group's recommendations have made a valuable contribution to the work of the European Union institutions. Another recent example is that in the field of animal cloning for food supply, the Commission has adopted on October 19, 2010, a report to the Parliament and the Council where it's proposed to suspend temporarily for 5 years the use of the technique in the EU for reproduction of all food-producing animals, the use of clones of these animals, and the marketing of food from clones, and to establish the traceability of reports of semen and embryos to allow farmers and industry to set up data banks of offspring in the European Union. One of the problems that we discussed was that there were so many gaps of knowledge. We didn't know where the semen or the cows or sheep came from. So in order to be able to regulate this, you needed to have this information. That's one of our proposals. Further examples can be found in the part 2 of the General Activity Report. I don't want to take up your time by going through that, but also the European Parliament has discussed some of our reports and voted on some of the issues covered by our reports on animal cloning, nanotechnology and food, in particular nanotechnology, labeling of products containing products, nanotechnology products. Now I want to come to what may be more relevant to some of your concerns here, some of the challenges and the distinctive European approaches to these challenges. Now, in part 3 of the General Activity Report, we outline some future challenges for European society, and this is also a novelty compared to earlier General Activity Reports. And of course, we discussed very much how to phrase this, because the idea was not to tell our successors what they should think about, but to provide an input to the discussion of issues that they are likely to have to face. And these challenges are not facing European society today and tomorrow are not less daunting than 50 years ago when the unification of Europe began, but the nature of the challenges have changed and they raise partly new issues. And they include, as you can see on this slide, several ethical aspects of new developments in areas such as surveillance technologies, which has become an increasingly important issue, not only in this country but in many other countries after 9/11, where you have effectiveness, protection of, against crime and things like that versus integrity. Methods used to collect store and analyze massive amounts of data, which we can now collect by using new technologies, genetics combined with nanomedicine and bioinformatics. Enhancement, new ways of changing human physical and mental capacities. Methods used to study and improve public health, prevention of pandemics, where you can also easily see certain values coming into conflict. Animal health and welfare in relation to the needs of research, agriculture and food industry. World hunger, more than 800 million do not have enough food to know, as you know today. Food security and food safety, food and agricultural techniques, intellectual property rights and open access, taking patents on stem cells, patents on products developed in synthetic biology. This is a very hot issue and difficult to deal with because the IPR framework was conceived for a totally different area. You invent a screwdriver and you have a problem, you invent a new way of dealing with it, and no problem in getting a patent for that. But basic here is the invention discovery distinction and the product and process distinction. And when you talk about biotechnology, these distinctions are not very easy to apply. So there are many things to say about that. Of course, we do not claim, as you can see in red, that these are the only challenges or the most important ones facing European society. We think this is an input to the discussion and things that are worth thinking about. Now, why should we meet these challenges? You and I, European Group of Ethics, and others. Well, there are two different arguments that you can think about. One is an appeal to self-interest. One of the things that we have learned from the recent economic financial crisis is that our economies are interrelated. We can also see increasing gaps between the developed and the developing world, and that will, in the long run, be detrimental to ourselves. The other argument is an appeal to human rights. Human rights are universal and hence apply to individuals in the developed and developing world alike. And this provides a different moral underpinning than appeal to self-interest. The difference, to put it very simply, is that in the one case, you have an empirical argument. If we don't do this, we will be harmed ourselves in the long run. In the other argument, you have a normative starting point, human rights. Now, to meet these heavy challenges, you need to identify specific issues, you need to articulate the concerns, you need to provide a solid scientific basis, if possible. I mean, in many new and rapidly developing emerging technologies, there are knowledge gaps, known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So the solid basis is somewhat shaky sometimes. And we have to learn to live with that and think of the evidence available as provisional. We use that as a starting point. We are prepared to change our views when and if we get better evidence. Then we need to describe current hard and soft law and to make the ethical points of departure explicit. Now, human rights. A few words about that. Personally, I think a human rights-based approach is useful, and we have, as I said, more and more come to use that. There are, of course, philosophical justifications for this, Rawls, Gewirt, Dewar, and others. But these are, of course, not uncontested, not even in Manchester. And you know, John Harris and Julian Savulescu, they take a dim view of human rights. And I am fully aware of that. So every starting point in philosophy can be contested, and there are always arguments against it. But human rights, they have a certain attractiveness. If you're interested in providing recommendations, that will have an impact on decisions taken, because they have a political support in the sense that they are, and legitimacy in the sense that they play a crucial role in declarations of the United Nations, of the Council of Europe, which have been voted and accepted in a democratic process. So there is some political backing which is required for change. You can appeal to these human rights, and that will have some force.